see such a big turnout. Must admit that's a little unexpected because the projections were that we're like last year. I think the geological engineering changed the program, and so usually we have like 40 to 50 people. And then last year they changed it so that you do third and fourth year, or put it in third year, whatever. So there's like double last year. And so there was close to 90 people. And this year we're assuming we'd go back to what we were, but we seem to have close to 80 people as opposed to 40. So that may present a couple of challenges during the year, but we'll contend with them. You guys are versatile. The other thing I'm going to tell you right now is that we have been working very hard over the last couple of years to transition this course to something that is sustainable, something that is open source, something that is interactive. So there's going to be a lot of apps and things that you're going to have an option to use. And I think it's going to be a learning experience that will be hopefully a little bit new to you and also really rewarding. So there's a few things that are really test-driven this particular year, but we have managed to put everything on web. Everything's web-based, everything's downloadable, clickable, and I'll kind of take you through that as we go. We're also videotaping all of the lectures, so they're all being streamed live to YouTube. We did that actually 2 years ago. It turned out to be pretty useful, because there were some people who missed classes, and then also they found it very good as a review. So when you're going into the final exam, sometimes there was a particular lecture and like, well, what exactly was that? You can actually go back to the lecture and then sort of cycle along. That helps. So everything is going to be on recorded. Thibaut Astic, who is a graduate student here and is also an official TA for the course, is going to be doing that. So first of all, my name is Doug Oldenburg. I'm a professor here. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself later. There's really two instructors for you, myself, and there's a co-instructor, which you didn't know about. It's Soggy Kang. Soggy was a PhD student with me. He finished up his PhD. He's currently a postdoc, and he's going to do a postdoc in Stanford beginning January. And frankly, he would like to have the experience of lecturing. And he's been actually very instrumental in developing a lot of the apps. So he's you'll really like him, and he's intimately involved. So, not much about me, but it's a little bit. Maybe I can find out a bit about you, in particular your backgrounds. For instance, how many people here are actually geologists? Ooh, minority group. And you're all sitting together. That's cool. Okay. Geologic engineers? Definitely outnumbered. Anybody else? Any EOS professional programs? Anybody from like hydrology or anything? Where are you from?
Geography. Hydrology for the PGO.
Oh, okay. And somebody else was no. That's it. So this is basically a geological engineering course. So as I said, my name is Doug Oldenburg. I've been teaching here forever, and maybe a little bit longer. My room number's up there. I'm sort of in the fifth floor up here. And here's my email. And then Soggy is a postdoc, and that's how you can get a hold of him. Soggy actually did his PhD on something called induced polarization, which has a lot of applications for things like groundwater, mineral exploration, and also some environmental studies. So it's, and you'll be seeing something about induced polarization a little bit later on. I have two official TAs, which you can imagine is way short of what we need. So there's Mike Mitchell, who's a PhD student with me, and Thibault, who's sitting here, and I'll introduce you in just a second. Maybe a good way to start all this is just to not get so much into course or what we're doing, but I just thought it might be worthwhile showing you a few problems that occur that I think as any person in society you're kind of connected with at one level or the other. So I'm just going to show you a few of these, and you can decide which, if any, you kind of resonate with, as a geological engineer or as something else. So first of all, there's resources. Clearly, everybody's keen on that. There's, minerals. We have to find minerals. Plays an important part in our society. Similarly, hydrocarbons. We, are basically powering our civilization on hydrocarbons. We're trying desperately to get off of them and wean ourselves to something else, maybe geothermal energy or something else. And also one of the resources, we tend not to think about it so much as a resource, but it really is, which is groundwater. The fact that you have clean water to drink, and if you have ample supplies, that is one of the most incredible resources that you can imagine. You tend to take it for granted until you reach a point where you don't have enough water or it's contaminated, and at which point now it really becomes a problem. You see it's a resource. In fact, it's the same as our air, right? You tend to take it for granted, especially in Vancouver when it's nice and clear almost all the time, and then you get a couple of weeks, like the last couple of weeks, and you think, oh my God, this is terrible. How can you live there? So resources. Natural hazards. We see, we're hearing them sort of on a constant rate. There's all kinds of volcanoes that people have been watching what's been happening in Hawaii over the last couple of months. There's earthquakes that hit places just absolutely devastating, and there's tsunami that come in that wash everything. So those are real major disasters, natural hazards. They just occur, but there's clearly want to understand these and to do things to mitigate them. Here's maybe where you fit in a little bit more to geotechnical engineering. Got a tunnel, got a mountain, want to put something through, get a driveway, so need to build something in. For anybody who's been involved in doing anything underground, there's always in mind safety issues. One of the big ones is water, because if you're down a kilometer beneath the surface and you're doing something, there's always layers of water above you, and they come in and they flood the mine and cause havoc. And here's probably where you guys really resonate: slope instability. So you're sitting at the base of something, and you get a big landslide that comes down and destroys your roads and houses and things like that. Environmental issues. Unfortunately, we're very guilty as a society for dumping all kinds of crud into our environment. Saltwater intrusion, we're fertilizing the heck out of some places, and there's just so much salt, it's killing stuff. We're also pulling water out of places, and that's allowing salt water to come in. An area that we've been working in at UBC for a decade or more, and it's very much of interest, is unexploded ordnance. So this is actually our own group. It's in Montana, and here's a field, and you're looking for a little bomb. And that has come about. Well, here it's from military training exercises. There's lots of proving grounds in North America, but sometimes it's various combat missions. And you have to appreciate that whenever they do any of these military missions and the sky is black with all of these bomblets, there's probably 10% of those things that are not going off. That's a lot, right? and then they just go into the ground. And if you get there immediately after, like, okay, you can see them, but if you don't get there and grass grows over, first thing you know, you're in a situation like this and you can't see anything. Then there's either surface or underground storage. You perhaps have heard a lot about carbon sequestration. Basically try to extract carbon from the air, and most emphasis has actually been on sort of coal-fired power plants or things like that, to at least extract the carbon dioxide and shove it down into into the subsurface. More and more, we're hearing a lot about aquifer storage and recovery, especially if you've noticed over the last few years how intense all of these big rain events have been. California, for instance, they're in a period of drought, but then they get these big, they're actually called atmospheric rivers, and they are like a river because they're carrying about as much water at 100 kilometers up as you would with the Amazon River flowing through. So if it comes down too quickly, it just runs off and actually is detrimental because it's taking all the soil with it. But if you could somehow trap this, put it into the ground, store it in times of plenty, and then pull it out later on when you need it, you'd be in good shape. So aquifer storage and recovery. Radioactive waste, we still, as a society, do not know what to do all this stuff. We've got radioactive nuclear power plants. The amount of radioactive waste just continues to mount up. We do not have long-term strategies for these things. And we've got industrial waste disposal. So that's a bunch of problems, and I'd be disappointed if anybody is sitting there and couldn't really affiliate or empathize with what is going on in some way. I think those are things that kind of resonate with all of us, and they perhaps have more close ties, for those of you who are going to be professionals and involved in some projects that somehow are connected. So there is a question of, like, what do all these problems have in common? So if you think about it, you've got this whole array of problems, and what do they have in common? And that is that really each one of them, if you're going to solve them, requires some ability, some way of kind of looking into the earth and trying to understand what's there without actually digging or drilling. So that's the issue. You have these challenges out there, and you really want to know what's beneath the surface. You can see the surface, and you're really good at mapping that, but you need to find out what's in there. And here's where geophysics come in, because almost by definition, geophysics is really the only discipline that's kind of devoted to that goal. Time machine. So what I want to do today is just kind of set a little bit of a scene. So maybe just a couple of things. There's brought over, like, who uses geophysics? How does it work? What is geophysics? And what can geophysics actually tell us? Here's some pictures. We're gonna, here's some guys that are out in the field, and and then they're collecting data, and eventually they're getting a 3D picture of what's underneath here. That's kind of a nice thing about how geophysics works. So there's a couple of things. One is like, okay, what is this course? And I've written it explicitly up here. So this is an introduction to applied geophysics. We're going to focus on how geophysics and geophysical information can impact your problem, and to give you some idea about how that works. What the course is not is a mathematical treatment about geophysics and all the equations and stuff that goes into it. What we're going to be doing is kind of looking at the general physical principles, which everybody can understand because they're almost intuitive in most cases. And we're going to apply those, and we'll look at various kinds of problems that are associated with them. So really the goal here is to help you understand if you have a particular problem, if geophysics might be useful for you, and then if it is, like, okay, what kind of a technique would I use? What sort of a survey would I do? And then what do I expect? What can I possibly get out? What are my expectations? These are the important ingredients, because you are the people who will go out, you're going to get jobs, you're going to be CEOs of firms and whatever that, and you're going to have problems, and you are actually going to be in the position of deciding whether, you know, maybe geophysics could actually be useful in helping you solve your problem. And this course is going to set the basis for that, because we're going to try to connect the problems with the particular physical properties, surveys, and kind of give you an idea about what you can and cannot get done. And if you have realistic expectations about what you might get out from applying a particular technique, then you've got some chances of success. So what are you going to get? Well, you're certainly going to get some new knowledge. This is basically Geophysics 101. So this would be, you know, if there were geophysics students that were taking this course, and there are not, because it's really not part of the program, this would be the first course that they might take. There's a little bit of physics. I mean, we try to emphasize physical principles, and you're going to see a lot of images, you're going to see a lot of simulations. So physical principles are good. There's not very much math, and we're application oriented. You're going to pick up some new skills in the sense of kind of understanding how, within the context of your particular problem, you can pick up some geophysical information and apply that and actually make use of that. And then there's also an attitude thing, which is kind of interesting, because, you know, a lot of people, if you mention the word physics, heaven forbid, you know, it's just like, oh my God, that's so scary, right? They're like, I don't want to go there. It's just too complicated, right? Well, the reality of that is that this stuff is not complicated. The equations and working with them and deriving them and putting into a computing algorithm, you know, the simulations that you see, that could be complicated, but you're not going to be involved in that. You're just kind of looking at kind of end results. So the bottom line is that actually it's not intellectually scary at all, and it's even better than that, because I don't know about you, but I get a great deal of satisfaction about being able to understand at some fundamental level how things are working. And if you have a mental image of something that you can understand and put it into context, and you can filter, you can understand, then it's suddenly like, oh, that's good. I got it, right? And I think you'll find it's fun, because you learn and you understand and you apply it to something, and then like, okay, that's useful. So what are our topics, and how are we going to go through the course? We're going to start off with physical properties. So everything that we have is made up of a bunch of physical properties, whether it's magnetic susceptibility, density, your electrical conductivity. We're going to spend a whole lecture on this, but we want to talk about physical properties because that's the connecting link between your problem and geophysics. So if there's anything that is critical, it's this first element here, physical properties, and how they relate to your particular problem. And then we're presenting everything in what we call a 7-step framework. So it's actually kind of a nice bunch of boxes in which you take your particular problem and you put it into the context of this. So the first element of that is like, okay, what's my problem? And you'd be surprised at how many people don't really articulate what their problem is and what they want. They just say, well, I've kind of got a problem and solve it. That's not good enough. You need to articulate, what is it that I really want to have solved? And then you decide on what physical property is important. That opens things up to what survey do you want to employ, and then what are the data that you're going to collect? What's the processing that you're going to do? What's the interpretation that you make? And then finally, how does that interpretation feed back onto the initial problem? So it's a 7-step procedure, and we'll present everything in this course every time we do anything in that 7 steps. And that actually helps in communicating too between people, because then you've got your particular project outlined in a 7-step performance, and yeah, you can decide where you are. Then we'll start in earnest the different kinds of surveys. So we're first of all going to do magnetics, which is probably the most common and familiar to people. And then seismic, density, elastic parameters. Actually, the geological engineers are very much interested in that, because you're interested in rigidity of rocks. So seismic is useful. Ground penetrating radar. How many people have heard or have been connected with GPR, ground penetrating radar? Half a dozen. Okay. DC resistivity. One of the kind of back workhorses for geophysics. It's used a lot in the geotechnical industry. People like Golder, things like that, have large teams that work with this. And then finally, we'll look at electromagnetics and show applications for them. As I said, throughout what we're going to do with each of these is make sure that we kind of understand the basics, right? You understand the fundamentals, and then have reasonable expectations for what you can get out, or what a survey should be. Right. So that's kind of the plan. So how are we going to do all this? There was a few years ago that there was a Carl Wyman initiative that came up, and that have any of you guys had a complete Wymanized course? No? After millions of dollars were spent? Okay. Anyway, the idea there was that, we should get away from this kind of lecture style thing, and students should just read more, do more of that background work, and then the class time should be devoted more towards exercises and team-based learning and stuff like that. When that first came out, it seemed to me like the pendulum just sort of really went way over to one side, and they basically scrapped a lot of stuff that was really good and emphasized too much some of the sort of the team-based learning. However, that team-based learning part is in fact a very effective way of learning. So what this course is kind of a compromise. So first of all, there's going to be lectures. Okay, so standard lectures, and I'm going to be doing some demos with apps and stuff like this. So there'll be some kind of interactivity. With this many people in class, we probably won't have people running apps in the lecture time. We might do it in a subsequent venue. So that's the lectures. And then there's a team-based learning. Okay, so I'm going to divide you up into teams, maybe 7 or 8, and then we're going to try to figure out how to work in teams in this room, which is not ideally set up for that, but we'll see what we can do. And the idea with the team-based learning is that I'm going to assign you a reading to do. So there's going to be a a case history paper. And I'm generally trying to find these that are just like as simple as possible, but have some of the essential elements. And then you're going to take that home and you're going to read it. You'll come in on the next day, and there'll be a short quiz on this. So you'll fill out short answer questions on this. And then you'll get into your teams and you will answer some other questions or maybe something. So that's actually pretty effective. What that means is that when you're working in a team, you actually will have done the background work to critique. The problem with a lot of team exercise is that you get a team of 7 people, and there's 2 people that are really gung-ho, and there's a couple of people that are so-so, and there's a couple of people that are just like, I don't know, but I'm showing up. It doesn't work, right? So we're trying to develop some kind of interaction where at least everybody has got some level of understanding and commitment, and that's sort of our plan. It's kind of a 2-phase. So you do something individually, and then you work with the team. There's going to be a number of quizzes. So at the end of each of these modules, and there's like 6, I guess, there'll be a short quiz, 10 multiple choice, things like this. And then, and this is sort of the interesting part. I thought this was really cheesy when we first started that, but you're going to take the same 10 questions, you're going to generate your teams, and then you're going to have like a little scratch and win thingy, right? And you're going to answer those same 10 questions. And the idea is that you pick the first question, and you, as a team, have to decide, okay, what about scratch? A, B, C, or D? And if you scratch at A, you decide as a team to scratch A, and you get the star, it's like, sweet, right? If you don't get the star, it's like, shoot, and then you discuss a lot more, and then you try to figure out second best. So if you get the star the first time, you get 4 points. No, if you have to get it the second, you only get 2 points. And if you have 3, that's 1 point. So this is actually amazingly effective, and it's kind of fun. So that's where and then, of course, there's team competitions, right? So that's fun. And then we have the labs. So the labs are mostly computer-based exercises. We have worked really hard to try to make these labs self-contained and doable in 2 hours, so that by the end of that lab, you're done. That has been a huge work on our part, but we think we kind of have it. You'll use, there's labs up here, and not sure which one, but anyway, we've got the computing labs over in the old in the old building. You need to get an account. You can get that from your from the main office, and also for the labs, for those people who have them, if you can bring in your own laptop. We're kind of not sure how the labs are going to go, because technically I think there's only room for 30 people, and we have 2 lab sessions, so that kind of makes 60, even with poor math skills. So it's 80 people here. So we're going to, we got to be a little bit flexible, okay? But somehow we'll make it work, but it might require that there's actually 2 people using 1 computer. And frankly, I don't mind in the labs if you're working together, but everybody has to hand in their individual report. Okay, so we'll make that work. That's going to be instructed by the TAs, and you'll turn in the worksheets before the deadline. We'll usually give you a couple of days after the lab, but we can't give you much more than that, because we want to turn those labs around. Let's see. Maybe I'm going to make some comment here, and I'm going to come back to it. One of the challenges that we have for this course is I have 2 TAs. Each TA is allotted like 3.5 hours a week. That's what he's supposed to work, 3.5 hours a week, okay, and get all the stuff done. So first of all, there's 2 lab sessions, and with 40 people, we need both people in each lab session. Each is 2 hours, so that's 4 hours. It's already more than 3.5. And then there's putting together material for the labs, for the TBLs, doing all of the marking and stuff like that. And you can see that things really are going to kind of break down. So what we're going to do when it comes to the marking is introduce something where we just simply do not have the manpower to read carefully everything that has been put on your lab and write individual comments, which frankly I'm not sure is all that beneficial anyway. And we're going to go to a different method. So that's the lab component. Here's something that I think you will really enjoy, and that's our the use of our apps, because the apps are these sort of interactive modules that allow you to kind of explore, explore what's happening from the physics base. And what we're going to do is have an app competition during the year. And how this is going to work is that each one of you, I would like you to choose a problem that's really of interest to you. Like something in your field, so for all the geological engineers out there, some kind of dam safety or slides or tunnel making probably, or things that really, I don't care. But just something, something that really resonates with you, okay? And then you have to figure out, okay, which geophysical survey might be used? What are the questions that I want to ask, and which geophysical survey? And then you've got kind of an array of apps, and then you're going to fold these apps, and you're going to use those to help answer your questions, and then you're just going to fill everything out in that 7-step procedure. So this is going to be a way that you're going to really connect your problem with questions that you might have and things that you're going to learn throughout the course. So you're going to do that individually, and you can do that anytime during the year. So you might actually want to do it right at the beginning if you find particular surveys really, really useful. But then towards the end of the year, each team is going to collect all of the individual apps, and they're going to get together and they're going to decide, like, okay, which is the real stellar one here, which is the real kicker. And then you can get together and you can further develop this particular case history with the use of the apps, and then you'll present that to the class, and then get marked that. Okay, so that's how that's going to go. Oh, this is the slide everybody worries about, right? Okay, how's the grades? Here they are. The final exam is going to be worth 40%, midterm 15, the labs are 20, individual quizzes are 8, individual team-based learning is 8, there's team quizzes that are 4, and team-based learning is 5. So it is really spread out. So you can screw up, one of these and still probably, do okay. But that's basically the breakdown that we'll have. And for the marking, so for the individual team-based learning, they're going to be forms, these Google forms, and you're just going to submit those online. Have you done that before? Anybody? No? Oh, you're gonna have so many new things in this course. It's gonna be amazing. Okay, so these are ways of just look. We've got to get over the marking issue, right? It's just this really, really challenging thing to do. So everything that's possibly automatic has to go automatic. So that's the individual TBL. The individual quizzes These are going to be done on bubble sheets, and then they can also be marked automatically. The team-based learning and the labs, those are short answer questions, and they're paper-based worksheets. Okay. The only thing that we can do is provide a word evaluation. There will not be specific comments that are written on those papers, but the answers will be available. We're going to have an answering key that you can take a look at so that you know what you should have answered. And the way that the word grade thing works, you have these categories. You're either like awesome, okay, so that's like 95%. You did all the work really well, and you're just brilliant, right? Well, actually, you're better than brilliant, because brilliant is the next one. Brilliant is 80%, and you did the work and you understand all the concepts. Competent, 65. Did the work, understand most everything. Decent, 50. I wouldn't be too happy with decent. You did the work, but you don't really understand all the concepts, and if you fall short. So the reason that this actually works in practice is that I can tell you that over the years that I have been lecturing and looking at material that students hand in, honestly, you can just flip through, look at little bits here and there, and you get a really good sense of what that person knows. And I think that I could take virtually all of the TAs, all of my students, we'd be looking at these things, and we'd be quite consistent on that. So I think this actually works. And the thing about this is, if you're brilliant, like, fine, you don't have to worry, right? If you're competent, like, you might be fine with that, but you might shoot, I wouldn't mind being up in the brilliant thing. So now you first of all have the answers, but you also now have access to the TAs and myself and so on, right? So here's where you can be, with a little self-discipline, come in and say, I want to upthink. Why did I only get 65, right? Like, and then you look at what you wrote, and you can look at what we would expect, and you'd see like, oh yeah, I did really fall short here. Okay, so the onus is getting a little bit more on you, but actually I think that's not such a bad idea. So now we have some important web links. So the core, here is your main conduit to this course. So if I click on here, you end up at this page. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. What happened? Hold on. Maybe I have to exit. Hold on, just a sec. But you see that, right? Okay. So this is a professor's worst nightmare, right? You got all this stuff, right? It's all there, right? And it should be like with a click of the button. You click the button, and nothing happens. Okay. Here we are. So here's our here's our 350 website. There's quite a few things on here. So first of all, there's the times and location. There's something here called the course syllabus. Okay, and one could pick that up. So here's the course syllabus. You could kind of go through that. That kind of tells you a little bit about the overview of the course, how things are going to be parsed out, the lectures and the labs, the method for marking, and the rules and the contact information. Okay, so that's the syllabus. The main thing that you are going to be constantly referring to is something here called the course schedule. So if I click on that, that brings you here. So what you notice is that every day is here. So we've got the days, the topics. So here's the 5th, and here's our introduction and course goals. There's a syllabus, and there's a lecture. There. If I click on the syllabus, it brings me back to where I was. If I click on the lecture, you get the a PDF of the PowerPoints that have been going through, right? So everything that I give you is up here. You can continually keep track of this. You'll know that on Friday, we're actually going to discover some physical properties. And there's this thing here called GPG. That is about physical properties in the electric tube. Okay? So that's, this is your guidebook. It's your inroads to virtually everything that we've got, plus it's a scheduling to tell you what is coming up, what do I need, is this a Team BL, is there a quiz, or what? It's just completely all laid out. Now, not all of the links for the whole year are filled in, but we do have enough for the next. If I click on this guy, I end up with GPG, which stands for Geophysics for Practicing Geoscientists. And this is our open source resource developed over, the last 5 or 8 years, continues to be improved. Speaking of incredible amounts of effort, there's a huge number of graduate students that have contributed to this. Here's sort of the general layout. So there's something called foundations. So you're going to, this is something that you're going to read very quickly. So yeah, I want you to take a look at the GPG and just kind of get familiar with it. And you can start to look at foundations. And also, the next thing is also going to be physical properties. Then we have for each of these different elements that we were talking about, for instance, magnetics, they're all in a uniform format in the sense of presented with an introduction. There's the physical property, basic principles. Here's the survey. Here's the data. Here's the processing. Here's the interpretation. And then there's going to be links to some of the apps. This site is actually becoming pretty mature. It's now being used as a textbook for at least 3 other universities. It's all also open source, so that you as students, if you are reading something and you see something that's wrong or you see something that's unclear, there's options for you to add commentary and to edit things on GitHub. So it's truly open source. Everything is done under MIT open source license, and it's designed to kind of encourage collaboration for people around the world that are just teaching the same stuff. So that's the GPG. Let's see, where are we now? Let's go back here. Since I've only got 6 minutes. There's also something called GPG Labs. That'll be your inroad to the labs and the various apps. So I guess, rules, there's not many. I have one that is really important, and that is, if you are going to come here, I want you to pay 110% attention. That's all I ask. That means no devices where you're texting your friends or anything like that. I find it extremely distracting. I find it extremely rude. And for anybody who wants to do that, just please leave the room. I mean, I do not care if you show up or not. But if you show up, you are here. You are here to listen to what I have to say. You are here to pay attention, and you are here to give your undivided attention. So that's the basic rule. Yeah, there is some flexibility, with rescheduling things if you have a medical emergency or something like that, usual kind of thing. And yeah, we also have some flexibility in the labs, right? Because we need to somehow get everybody into 2 labs. How many people are scheduled for the Monday lab? Can you raise your hand real high? I need to count. 14, 16. How many are Tuesday? I think I just counted 60 people. Okay, all right. Maybe it'll be okay. Let's just try it. See how it goes. We're going to have to try to keep track of you. So we're going to use the first 4 digits of your student ID. So when we list things out, that's all you'll see. So that'll be you. And because you'll need an ID for these online submissions. And yeah, so we'll also put together teams for you, so that everybody has a team. And yeah, I guess I don't know what that was for. Just to honestly, I think the one thing this course has to offer is that there's a lot of tentacles that come out from this that can be useful at some point in your life. I've had a number of students come back to me and 10 or 15 years after they've taken the course, and they relate things like, "Oh, that was really useful, and this is how I ended up using that." But totally not think about that with respect to. I've got 3 minutes. I just flipped through. Okay, so here's sort of the kind of thing that we have. Here's an instrument. You're going to see this. It's called an EM31. It's electromagnetic experiment, and you're just sort of going to walk. Well, this is what it's done. It's walking over an aquifer in the lower mainland. And you can see you got numbers high here and low here, and this is sort of tells how conductive the material is. And you see that there's something happening here. And it turns out that, yeah, there's a region over here that's got high values and low values. And those actually mean something from a hydrogeologic standpoint. Magnetics, here's a magnetic map. Quite beautiful, actually. And, these lines on here, those are a geologist's wildest imagination drawing stuff through here. Yeah, so anyway, there's geophysics overlaid on geology, but there's, you can see that there might be structure, there might be relationships between them. Well, we're not really in this course, but what we kind of do is we're going to take these data and you can actually process them, you can interpret, you can actually get 3D images of the subsurface, which is kind of cool. Ground-penetrating radar, it's an electromagnetic device. If anybody, it's kind of like seismic, except it's EM waves that are going down. And so here's a guy, he's got a transmitter, and there's a receiver, and you get out a picture that looks like that. But what is that picture telling you? This is a seismic image, and if you kind of understand a little bit about what's going on, you can start to draw some lines on those, and those are reflections, and those are locations of interfaces, and that's actually telling you something about what that subsurface is. And here's the mineral deposits. It's an area in Quebec, and that's what a magnetic map looks like. but again, you take that magnetic map, and you can actually turn it into a picture. And the thing about geology, or the thing about, well, the thing about geology is you only see the surface, right? The thing about geophysics is you sometimes get a map, but it's just pictures of data. And sometimes they tell you something, but sometimes it's hard to do. But if you actually take these and process them properly, then you can maybe get a three-dimensional picture. And this one's got a lot of information as to what's going on. So that's kind of where we are. So what we're going to do on Friday, we're going to have a lecture on physical properties. At the Monday, we're going to talk about the framework. So for the lecture on physical properties, you could read the GPG. For the lecture on Monday, there's also something on the GPG called the framework. Then Wednesday, we're actually going to have a quiz. Ooh, on just about the foundations, right? And then I'm going to give you a paper to read. This is kind of interesting. It's some guy's got it all the way around through Ireland, and he's got 6 different problems and 6 different kinds of surveys, and he's used those to give you some information. So I think this is a very nice way of kind of getting integrated. And yeah, then on 10th and 11th, there'll be physical properties lab. So it's not a computer. This is not a computer lab. This is actually going to be physical properties. People really like this because you're now taking rocks that you're familiar with, maybe, and you can make some assessment of, yeah, this rock looks like that, or whatever you see with rocks. And then you take them and you put them into the geophysical piece of equipment, and you measure some physical properties. And people find this like, whoa, wait a minute, this rock is really that different from that. So that's it. That's where we are. Oh, actually, hi. Do you have a camera? Nicole, can you start? I need your picture. Hold on. Okay. And then if I take your picture, then you can go.